Hey, it's Maddie, and I'm here with my husband, Andrew. Andrew has a remodeling company, Eclipse Remodeling, and today we're going to be talking about some frequently asked questions when it comes to roofing.
Yeah, so these are the questions that I get asked the most from homeowners and then just from friends and family. Also, questions that I don't get asked from homeowners or friends and family that I think are important to ask.
Great. Okay, so the first set of questions is about choosing the right roofing contractor. So the first question is, what should homeowners look for in a reliable roofing contractor?
So there's several factors to consider. I think the biggest ones for me would be that they're licensed, that they're insured, and then digging a little bit deeper into the insurance and making sure the level to which they're insured. Is it an umbrella policy? Does it cover the crews? Things like that would be my big ones.
So a follow-up to that is, how can people verify a contractor's license and insurance status?
That's a great question. Most states have a home improvement commission. Those websites are easily findable online, and you can verify their license through that. The biggest thing is that good roofing companies should really bring that stuff to you. It should be very early in the conversation. They should provide you with their license and their insurance policy number, which you can also verify online.
Okay, and what are some critical questions to ask before hiring a roofing professional?
For me, the big ones I would ask are, do the crews work exclusively for you? I would ask to see photos of other projects. I would look at online reviews. Things like that would be the most critical right off the bat.
Okay, so related, what steps... Okay, so related, how can homeowners evaluate a contractor's past work and reputation online?
So online, I mean, reviews are going to be a good indicator. Also, spending some time looking at those reviews and really seeing what people talk about. So do they highlight the things that are important to you? Not just they did the roof, but communication was great. The cleanup was done very well. They took real good care with my plants, stuff like that. So giving a little bit more time to actually sift through the reviews. And then again, asking them for photos of installs is going to be the best indicator, because you should be able to see from before and after the level of care that they take, the level of finish that they bring to the project as a whole.
Okay, so when I'm considering roofing, how do communication and project timelines impact the contractor-client relationship?
For a project like roofing, it's going to be the most critical element of it. Having a good, open, honest line of communication is going to be critical, and you should know that pretty early on when talking to whichever companies you're talking to, because as the project goes on, you want somebody that's going to be quick to respond, is going to hear any concerns or criticisms that you have and respond accordingly. You don't want it to be a one-way street.
What are some red flags that homeowners should be aware of when selecting a contractor?
So the nice thing about red flags is that they're obvious. I would say ones that aren't, for me, is that that the people you're talking to are not providing you with some of this information, some of which we've already talked about, the insurance, the licensing, but that you're feeling like you're having to get more out of them than they're giving to you. They should handle even things you wouldn't have ever thought to ask. They should provide you that information.
What are the pros and cons of hiring local versus national roofing contractors?
So the biggest advantage of a local company is going to be their relationship to the crews. So the actual people that are going to be doing the work on your home. With a national company, they don't necessarily have those relationships, or they're touch and go. They don't do a ton of work. Local companies are going to have long-term, robust relationships with these people, and thus they're going to know their quality rather than, hey, I just have a guy.
Okay, and then should this happen, what steps should homeowners take to resolve disputes with a contractor?
Yeah, so your state home improvement commission is going to be the best bet for you. They have people there that can answer your questions. So, because sometimes people don't even know if they actually have a problem. They think they might, and again, if communication has broken down, they're not getting feedback from the company. So the home improvement commissions can answer things like, is this actually a problem? And then if it is, they have both the personnel to mediate disputes, and then also some protections built in for homeowners in the event that something does go wrong, which obviously everybody wants to avoid from the jump.
And the last question. The last question, why are industry certifications and training important in choosing the right contractor?
So a primary thing people are purchasing when they get a new roof are the warranties. And those generally come hand in hand with different levels of certification. So if a company you choose if that company doesn't have the proper levels of certification, the warranties you think you may be getting, or your neighbor got, or you read about, may not actually be coming to you. So it's critical.
Okay, great.
Let's just keep going. Next section.
I'm just going to check the...
Okay.
Still rolling.
Okay.
Check. Still rolling. Okay, the next section is understanding residential roofing services. The first question is, what are the most common types of residential roofing materials and how do they compare?
So by far, the most common residential roofing material available are going to be asphalt shingles.
Mm-hmm.
Those came onto the market as a cost-effective replacement for time-consuming and very expensive materials that had been available for roofing. So things like slate and cedar, metal, and tile. And at this point, the longevity was the biggest difference between asphalt shingles and those kind of old-timey roofing materials. And now the warranties on asphalt shingles are 50 years, so really comparable to what those are at a fraction of the cost.
Okay, so aside from the cost effectiveness, why are asphalt shingles the most popular choice for residential roofs?
Well, they're ubiquitous, so it does make sense, and most HOAs and local jurisdictions will generally require you to have a similar roof. Also, homes that were built to have slate roofs or tile roofs or something like that are built differently, whereas a house that was built for an asphalt roof is really meant to have an asphalt roof.
Okay. And then what factors should homeowners consider when selecting the right roof for their home?
I think big things are making sure that it's passing your HOA requirements. There's nothing worse than going almost all the way to install and finding out that the color choice or the shingle type, or even some HOAs require specific manufacturers. So going through that process is worthwhile before you kind of get everything started. But then things like the color palette of the neighborhood. Do you want to stand out? Do you want to blend in? What are your long-term plans for things like colors of the windows and the siding and the shutters? Keeping that all in mind are good things to do when you're thinking about purchasing a roof.
Okay, so related, how can homeowners choose roof colors that enhance the curb appeal?
So there's kind of two ways to think about that. Different manufacturers offer different arrays of colors. Some offer a very limited number of colors. Some offer a wide variety. And then some offer even premium shingles that have unique color patterns to them. So there's value in standing out, but there's also a lot to be said for choosing something kind of tried and true and sticking with a black, gray, or kind of an earth tone earth tone brown will always serve you well.
When is it better to repair a roof versus replacing it entirely?
Yeah, so this is almost exclusively going to come down to age. So if you have a roof that's less than 10 years old, a repair should be something that one would consider. You can realistically expect to get another 5 to 10 years out of that roof regardless of the material. Over that 15-year mark, for sure, my expert opinion is you tend to be putting good money after bad. Roofing systems are just that. They are a system. So each individual type of material, and there's drip edge, there's ice and water barrier, there's the underlayment, there's the shingles themselves. So doing a repair might sound really easy, but the system really works as a whole. So after a certain point, it just becomes very difficult to get any longevity out of a repair.
Can you explain the residential roof installation process?
Yeah, so this can seem daunting, but it really should come with very concrete steps. So once you've selected the company, a good company is going to do what's called a site inspection. So they're going to come out to your property and they're going to survey it to just make sure that there's no big red flags for things that could come up during the install, but they're also going to sort of choreograph the actual install. So they're going to consider, okay, on the morning of the install, we're going to have the materials delivered, we're going to have the crew there. Where do we want to do the removal to? So where do all the excess materials, and it's tons of materials that are coming off some of these roofs. So where are we going to actually dispose of the materials off of the roof? What landscaping do we have to make sure to protect and tarp or cover with? Sometimes they use boards to cover things that could really be damaged from materials coming off the roof. And then how do we kind of start to plan out the install? So they'll do the site inspection. Once that's good and they have the information they need from there, they will order and obtain the materials. They'll then call you for a scheduled date for the install. On the day of the install, again, because they've done a site inspection, they should really hit the ground running. They'll be there early because you want to make use of as much daylight as possible. And then when the install is complete, again, they should really do a post-installation inspection where you meet with the project manager and just go over making sure everything's cleaned up. It's all done exactly as you thought it was going to be done and looks gorgeous.
And then finally, what are the most common questions homeowners have about residential roofing services?
I think big ones are, things like timeframes and costs. There are helpful resources online. I really recommend Remodeling Magazine's Cost versus Value Report to give you an idea of costs specific to your size of home. So it breaks it down like that as to what size home that they're doing an average of, and you can just kind of reverse engineer the math. And then timeframes, one, the availability of installs. So, and there are companies that might not be able to get you installed for weeks and weeks, and especially if you have a bigger issue, that can be really burdensome. So those are the kind of questions that I get asked the most, is how long does it take from start to finish, and then costs. And there are, again, I recommend Remodeling Magazine Cost versus Value to get an idea of that.
Okay, great.
I don't even remember what I answered to that question last time.
You can see my side of my body in some of these.
No.
You guys can just crop it down.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just checking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the next section of questions is about costs, permits, and emergency roofing. What factors most influence the cost of a roofing project?
So there's several. I would say the ones that I think most homeowners don't take into account would be things like the pitch of their roof and how multifaceted their roof is. So
Can you explain what multifaceted means
Yeah.
for a roof?
So if you think of a kind of what's called an up and over roof, so like a ranch house with just a roof that goes front to back, and it's just kind of a triangle over the home. It's not multifaceted. There's technically two, but it's a very simple roof. Whereas a roof that has like an A-frame gable over the front door that then leads to a garage that's in a different orientation up and over, and then they have like a porch in the back that's roofed at a different pitch. All of that can lead to more cost because there's a higher waste factor because you're cutting shingles and other materials at each section point or each facet point, as well as it's more labor intensive to seal each of those sections correctly and then tie them into one another.
Okay, and how do material choices like shingles, metal, or tiles affect overall expenses?
Yeah, so again, asphalt shingles are by far the most cost-effective roofing material out there. For people that have aesthetic desires for metal or tile, I think it's just important that people know that these are not slightly more expensive. They can be wildly more expensive. And again, importantly, you're not getting the big longevity difference that you used to compared to the 3-tab asphalt shingle. Now with the architectural asphalt shingles, again, most of those are warranted from anywhere from 35 to 50 years. So you're getting a lot of time out of a much more cost-effective material.
What are some hidden costs homeowners might encounter during roofing projects?
A good thing about roofing is that you really shouldn't have too many hidden costs. Most of that should be caught by the person you're talking to who comes out to your home or takes a look at it. A big one that I do think people don't consider enough is the wood decking itself, and that is sort of impossible to know. You could have indicators that you're going to need some decking replaced, but you won't know the full extent of it until everything's removed. Now, a good company should tell you, one, should talk to you about that prior to moving forward with the project, but they should also have pricing for you ahead of time for what it would be either per linear foot, per square foot, or per board in the event that you need wood replaced.
What permits are typically required for roofing work, and how can homeowners obtain them?
So in most of our area, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, permits are not a requirement for a roof replacement unless you are doing a full deck replacement. There are both counties in all of those states and then things like D.C. where permits can be required depending on what you're doing. But that process, good companies should at least help you with that process, if not handle it completely. I will say kind of related to this is HOA approvals. And that is something that people should consider. Certainly, well, they'll have to do some of the legwork for that because you're going to have to, a lot of HOAs require you getting neighbors' approvals and stuff, and they're your neighbors, so you should be a part of that. But HOA approvals can also be something that companies will help you with, but you might have to do a little legwork for.
What are the consequences of skipping permits for roofing projects?
Yeah, so if a permit is required and you don't get one, it can be a real problem. The most annoying, but least consequential of which is that states that require permits will oftentimes have people who will be driving around and get notified of an install taking place. They'll come by, look for the permit, and if you don't have one, they will make you stop in the middle of the install. So you could have a roof that's half torn off and the company has to stop and go get a permit before they can come back and finish it. So that's both annoying and can lead to a disastrous outcome. But it also has implications for things like your state home improvement commission in the event that you have an issue if a permit hasn't been obtained. And ultimately, while companies can say that they will get the permit for you, it is the homeowner's responsibility to have the permit. So the company can say that they will get all of that for you, but it is ultimately your responsibility to verify that.
Why is it essential to hire certified professionals for emergency roofing services?
Yeah, so obviously nobody likes to be in a situation where they have a roof emergency. Um, but in the event that you do, understanding how complex that is to solve and then the long-term ramifications of it not being properly sealed is very important. So if you have a storm-related leak, that the negative effects of that leak can spread not just internally but through the roofing system very, very rapidly. So if you don't have somebody who's certified and knows what they're doing when they go up there to try and either tarp it or seal it, until you can get it more permanently replaced, the problem can just kind of compound.
And how should homeowners budget for emergency repairs, and what costs should they expect?
Yeah, I would say that if you have a roof that is under warranty from both the manufacturer and the company that installed it, the huge benefit of this is you don't have to worry about it. It's all covered. So that budgeting and concern comes right off your plate. If that is not the position you're in, then I would really recommend budgeting for the replacement. And again, an important thing to consider is for home improvement projects like this, essential home improvement projects, there is a lot to be said for financing options to avoid a problem before you're on the back foot dealing with an issue when it's just too late.
Okay, great. We're doing this in like a quarter of the time. I think it sounds better too.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about long-term roofing solutions and gutter integration. So, what should homeowners know about roofing warranties and their coverage?
So I think a critical thing for most homeowners is to understand who is servicing the warranties and how are they registered. So there's a lot that goes into warranties. Again, companies should really be providing kind of an absurd amount of information regarding that to you when you're talking to them.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that people miss is, okay, who registers that? Is that my responsibility, or is the company doing that on my behalf? And then who services it? So there are situations where people realize that kind of in the fine print that they have to call the manufacturer for a manufacturer claim on a warranty. That can be annoying and also confusing if you've never done that before. So knowing who services the warranty and then who registers the warranty are very, very important.
And how do labor warranties differ from manufacturer warranties?
Critically different. Labor warranties are provided by the company that does the installs and cover either mistakes or omissions during the actual installation process, whereas manufacturer warranties cover the materials. So do they last the time frame they were guaranteed to? Do they suffer too much granular loss? Do they sustain the winds that they are rated to sustain? Those things would be a manufacturer coverage, whereas things like were they adhered properly, were all the components put on, were things addressed that should have been addressed at the point of install incorrectly, those things are all covered by a labor warranty. So knowing those differences and then what specifically you're getting, because you can get manufacturer warranties that are up to 50 years on a roof, but you can get a labor warranty that's 1 to 5 years, and 6 years down the road you have a problem and you find that you're not covered.
Okay, so moving on to gutters, what role do gutters play in roof health, and why are they So moving on to gutters, what role do gutters play in roof health, and why are they essential?
So gutters are critical in roof health, and primarily it comes down to the proper flow of water off the roof, and then also important away from the foundation. So having gutters that are pitched properly, are installed properly with the additional roof components, so things like drip edge lining up with the gutters properly, are going to lead to a much longer and less issue-prone roof over the long term.
How can clogged or damaged gutters impact the lifespan of a roof?
Yeah, so when gutters back up and they don't sustain the water flow from the roof, or they're damaged, so they're not pitched correctly, so water is not flowing to the corner where it drains, but pooling in the middle of the run of gutter. What can happen is that water flows up and gets under the first layer of shingle and puts stress. So there's the additional water coming from underneath the roof decking, the additional stress on the materials that are made to be watertight towards the edge of a roof, but you don't want to stress them. And then also in different temperatures. So in the winter, if that water is pooling and then it freezes, now you have an ice dam created by the eave of the roof. That's not a great position to be in.
Okay, and what should homeowners consider when choosing gutter systems to match their roofing?
I think the biggest consideration, and it's the least fun because it's not about colors or designs. Gutters are very functional.
Yeah.
But considering the actual amount of water that's coming off their roof and do their gutters currently handle it is the biggest consideration. It's all water management. So if you have, again, a multifaceted roof where water is coming off of one roof onto another roof and into a gutter, that can oftentimes in heavy rains just be far too much volume of water for a 5-inch gutter to handle. So I would then consider upgrading to a 6-inch gutter, and potentially adding leaf protection if that's another factor that affects their gutter health.
Okay, and then finally, I love this question because I've heard you get it before in person. Are gutter guards worth the investment, and what are their benefits and drawbacks?
Yeah, so if you live in a certain environment where you have a lot of tree coverage with certain types of foliage, and I'll explain more about this in a second, but the short answer is yes, they can be a very, very good investment. If you think about what you pay, even though it's not a ton of money twice a year to have the gutters cleaned, do that over 15, 20, 30 years, all of a sudden the investment can pay off very, very quickly. And by the way, remove an annoyance off of your plate and something that you could forget and then leads to problems where the gutters back up. So very easily could be worth the investment. Now, they're not necessarily the perfect solution to everybody who lives in a heavily tree-covered area because there are certain leaves that a gutter system will not really solve the problem. So considering that, and then having, again, a remodeling company that can consider the water flow, the effectiveness of a leaf protection system, all of those things that go into a gutter system and give you good feedback as to what will be worth it for you is just invaluable.
Okay, great. Well, I think we learned a lot about roofing and roofing contractors. I think this was a good run through of just all the information that generally you could get asked.
Yeah, like I said, these are questions that I both get a lot, and then there are some in here that I don't get enough. So it doesn't answer all of the questions. It's obviously not enough to know, how much is my roof going to cost, and, should I have my roof done today? But it's enough that if you knew the answers to all these questions, I feel like you would go into the process knowing exactly what you should expect and not having the concerns for missing something huge.